Hello and welcome everybody. In this dancing butcher build I will show you a fun to play and hard hitting dexterity setup that you can also use as a weird Eljenkovic cosplay. We also incorporate bleed build up and sprinkle it with some ranged lightning damage. Sounds weird? Well, it works nicely and nothing wrong with being a bit weird. In general, we will make the most out of the very hard hitting sword dance Ash of War, regenerate 1% of our health with every hit, and those also apply around 100 bleed build up each. As secondary weapon we have a small axe with the Thunderbolt Ash of War that, thanks to the pure dexterity setup, hits hard for low FP costs and even refunds 4 FP per kill. On top we have a whooping 78 poise and close to 50% physical damage reduction without any kind of buffs. Sounds intriguing enough? Then let us dive into the details. The main weapon we use is the butchering knife, one of these typical FromSoft oddities. Despite looking like a curved greatsword, it is a great axe that, unlike all other great axes, scales best with dexterity. And for sure the butchering knife doesn't look anything like a knife. It also has the unique ability to heal us for 1% of maximum health with every hit. Somehow I imagine an intern high on drugs mixing up 3 different concepts and baking that into one weapon. For this build it is perfect, so I will not complain. The weapon moveset itself is pretty fast for a hard hitting weapon. Sword Dance as our Ash of War here provides us with some fantastic synergies. The skill is already one of the best in the game and a devastating melee attack by itself with super low FP costs. The ability to connect quickly 3 hits means we get back 3 health ticks, apply around 300 bleed build up, deal significant poise damage while also dealing a truckload of damage. What is not to like here? Sword Dance combines the base damage of the skill with the damage of the weapon. As a dexterity Ash of War, the skill damage purely scales with the weapon upgrade level and dexterity, so we are making the most of it in a pure dexterity setup. And because the butchering knife gives us a B scaling for dexterity when set to the bleed affinity, we do exactly that. The arcane stat is low at level 150 because we first want to reach 80 dexterity, but arcane will improve afterwards, which means the weapon damage and bleed build up will further improve in NG plus and beyond. The 102 bleed build up at level 150 in this setup are decent enough for now, but a butcher can always make use of a second axe, and a range option to decimate minor foes or damage bigger targets is always nice to have. For this reason we use the Sacrificial Axe as secondary weapon with the Thunderbolt Ash of War. This skill also scales purely with dexterity, weapon level and weapon damage, perfect for this build. The axe is set to the keen affinity. Even with its B scaling, this outperforms the lightning affinity in terms of thunderbolt damage, as you can see. The 4 FP refund on kill turns the already cheap skill, which costs 10 FP, into a tremendous bang for your buck ability. The Sacrificial Axe is purely used for Thunderbolt. In melee range we quickly switch to our main weapon. By the way, Sword Dance does not benefit from two-handing your weapon, but your standard attacks of course do. So no damage loss when you quickly swap weapons and use the skill before two-handing it for your regular attacks. The whole setup is really an all-game build because we only use 1 damage stat until level 150, and you can obtain Sword Dance and the Sacrificial Axe very early. The butchering knife and Thunderbolt may be around level 50. For the latter you need to progress halfway through the capital city. You can find all important Wiki-Links for the weapons and skills in the video description. Stat-wise, the perfect starting class would be the Bandit here. Speaking of stats, here comes the level 150 overview. Vigor at 50. We will further boost our health with a Talisman and we will trade damage off, but an impressively high poise and physical damage reduction supports this playstyle. 20 mind is easily enough to spam our Ashes of War when needed. Sword Dance is dirt cheap for its damage with only 6 FP, and the Sacrificial Axe will refund 4 FP for killing any enemy with Thunderbolt. Endurance at 35 to manage our equip load and keep medium rolling. It also provides us with enough stamina in this build. Strength sits at 16 to meet the minimum requirement for both weapons. Dexterity at 80. The reason not to push some arcane for a higher bleed build up at this point is that Sword Dance, weapon damage and Thunderbolt all benefit the most from Dexterity. Especially Thunderbolt has no synergies whatsoever with arcane, and while the Butchering Knife with the bleed affinity does improve a bit with arcane, it has only a descaling in that stat. Intelligence and faith are not needed for this build. Arcane sits at 13 because I just started to improve this stat at level 150. From here on I will mainly invest into arcane for NG++ and beyond. This will further increase the Butchering Knife's damage and increase our bleed build up. Very useful against the constantly higher health of enemies in additional playthroughs. Talismans are the all-time classic Shard of Alexander and the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman for close to 50% physical protection. Earth Tree Favor +2 is needed to get enough equip load, and it also pushes health and stamina. These values are percentage based and will hold up great the further you increase your level and base stats. Lastly, I would use Millicent's Prothesis, which I do not have on this jar, so I use the Rotten Winged Insignia, which is also a good choice. Sword Dance hits 2 to 3 times and our main weapon is quite fast. Because we often trade damage, the Ritual Sword Talisman is maybe not the best choice here. If you have Millicent's Prothesis, you can invest 5 more points into Arcane. The Flask of Wondrous Physic is really up to you. Improved poise damage and increased damage with successive attacks are excellent damage improving options. Damage negation or a heal over time can be useful in boss fights or for more defensive setups. As you have already noticed, I'm using the Lionel's Armor set here with its incredible poise and damage protection. I swapped the helm mainly because it is always clipping with the Butchering Knife. The Mask of Confidence adds another 3 arcane and fits the visual appearance in my opinion. Overall, a really fun and effective build with excellent synergies, various options for melee combat and some quick range damage in between. No fiddling around with spells or buffs at all. And quite chunky, pun intended, when it comes to tank some damage. What other builds would you like to see covered in the future? Let me know in the comments. This is all for now about Elden Ring. Take good care of yourself and enjoy your journeys in the lands between.